Men form civilizations to escape nature, and then they wish to return to a state of nature to escape the discontents of civilization. It seems that men view both nature and civilization as threatening. This is the motivation behind forming religion as a way of psychological protection against the dangers of nature and faith and against the injuries that threaten him from human society itself. Not only does our fear of death explain why we form civilizations, but it also explains the means we develop to keep civilizations in place. It explains how religions come to be by humanizing nature. Impersonal forces and destinies cannot be approached, they remain eternally remote. But if the elements have passions that rage as they do in our own souls, if death itself is not something spontaneous but the violent act of an evil will, if everywhere in nature there are beings around us of a kind that we know in our own society, then we can breathe freely, can feel at home in the uncanny and can deal by psychical means with our senseless anxiety. By humanizing nature and its forces, man gives them the character of a father, and just as every child eventually learns to rebel against his or her father, so do we learn to rebel against our heavenly fathers. Consequently, a doctor is not just a healer in society. A doctor is a warrior who rebels against death, for it is in fact natural to man to personify everything that he wants to understand in order later to control it. The relationship between death and religion is vaguely touched upon in the first chapter of Civilization and its Discontents, where Freud likens the oceanic feeling evoked by religion to the consolation offered by an original and somewhat eccentric dramatist to his hero who is facing a self-inflicted death. We cannot fall out of this world. That is to say, it is a feeling of an indissoluble bond of being one with the external world as a whole. Prior to writing Civilization and its Discontents and The Future of an Illusion, Freud's embitterment had already started to get hold of him when he wrote Beyond the Pleasure Principle. As we are told in Beyond the Pleasure Principle, there is a death drive in us. So we could say that it is the function of religion to make us come into terms with becoming inorganic once again. Religion achieves this by making us falsely believe death itself is not extinction, but the beginning of a new kind of existence which lies on the path of development to something higher. Freud sees religion as something harmful, but assuming civilization runs a greater risk if we maintain our present attitude to religion than if we give it up, should we conclude Freud is asking us to return to being torn apart between civilization and nature? Remember, according to Freud, religion came into being to protect us from these two antipodes in the first place. Does rejecting religion mean embracing the misery caused by being pulled apart by these two poles? I don't think so. I can't but help think that Freud sees science as a substitute for religion. Science is the only cultural asset that is widely praised in The Future of an Illusion. We can assume this because, just like religion, the scientific spirit brings about a particular attitude towards worldly matters. But most importantly, the following passage tells us we can be sure that Freud considered science as a qualified candidate for replacing religion. Civilization has little to fear from educated people and brainwalkers. In them, the replacement of religious motives for civilized behavior by other secular motives would proceed unobtrusively. Nonetheless, we should bear in mind that we should not turn science into another ideology, for power over nature is not the only precondition of human happiness. Freud is very careful about how much emphasis one should put on science. An overemphasis on science could contribute to our miseries to such an extent that we might welcome death, the very thing we sought to avoid by forming civilizations. Regarding this point, Freud rhetorically asks, what good to us is a long life if it is difficult and barren of joys, and if it is so full of misery that we can only welcome death as a deliverer?